Right now, a delay at a shipping port in Oman is actually subtly driving up the cost of your weekly groceries.
Yeah, and at the exact same time, a massive dust storm in Phoenix is directly threatening the future rollout of artificial intelligence, which is wild.
Right. It is wild. Because those events, I mean, they seem entirely disconnected on the surface, but they are bleeding into one another in ways that are, frankly, physically reshaping the global economy. So welcome to the Deep Dive. We are really thrilled you're here with us today.
Glad to be here.
So our mission today is to unpack a pretty dense stack of sources from the Daily Tech Reader's August 9th, 2026 morning news brief. And the overarching theme we're exploring for you today is this intense, inescapable interconnectedness.
It really is a fascinating snapshot of where we are right now. I mean, we're looking at a world where these huge digital ambitions are crashing headfirst into, hard physical limitations.
Exactly. But before we get into the mechanics of how all of this connects, we really need to address the nature of our sources today.
Yeah, definitely. We have to lay down some ground rules.
Yes, this is an absolutely mandatory disclaimer for our discussion. The source material we're unpacking contains some highly politically charged content. So this includes statements from President Trump regarding AI regulation, ongoing partisan debates over Senate cryptocurrency bills, and of course the current U.S.-Iran military conflict.
Right.
We want to be incredibly clear with you, the listener. We're not taking any sides here. We're not endorsing any of the viewpoints, political figures, or policies mentioned. Our sole job is to act as impartial guides, strictly conveying the facts, the data, and the ideas exactly as they are reported in these sources so that you have the information you need.
Exactly. I mean, our focus is really on the underlying systems and how they impact you, stripping away all the political rhetoric to just look at the actual cause and effect.
Totally. So let's look at the first major system outlined in the briefing, which is the global supply chain. The physical world of trade is currently defined by a concept the sources call negotiated pauses.
Right. Negotiated pauses, which
Right.
is essentially a state of geopolitical purgatory.
Purgatory, yeah.
I mean, the underlying dispute hasn't been resolved at all. The adversaries are still armed and angry, but the immediate acute violence is just temporarily on hold. And the most glaring example dominating the markets right now is this 5-month-long standoff between the United States and Iran over the Strait of Hormuz.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because this isn't just, an abstract line on a map. Imagine the highway you take to work every single day suddenly has a heavily armed, totally unpredictable toll booth set up by a rival neighborhood.
That is a great way to picture it.
Right. Traffic backs up for miles, gas is wasted while you're just sitting there idling, and because those delivery trucks take twice as long to get anywhere, the cost of everything on those trucks skyrockets. The friction point in Hormuz is incredibly specific right now. Iran is demanding the authority to inspect commercial vessels entering the Persian Gulf.
Right, because they view their ability to disrupt those energy and shipping routes as basically their absolute strongest negotiating leverage. And the United States, conversely, requires dependable access through that strait without conceding permanent Iranian control over those inbound vessels.
It's a massive standoff.
It really is. Now, Oman is attempting to mediate some sort of arrangement, and President Trump has noted that discussions are progressing, but American officials are still preparing for renewed military action if diplomacy actually fails.
Which is nerve-wracking.
Oh, absolutely. And the mechanism of action here, like how this actually reaches your wallet, is through maritime logistics.
Okay, how so?
Well, when commercial carriers are forced to either wait out the standoff or take much longer maritime routes, say all the way around the Cape of Good Hope, you aren't just adding a few days to a journey. You are absorbing vessel capacity.
Oh, I see. You're artificially shrinking the global fleet.
Precisely. It creates a synthetic shortage of ships, and that directly increases shipping rates, skyrockets maritime insurance premiums, and burns exponentially more fuel. You just cannot isolate a choke point like that. Oil prices react to every single statement coming out of those negotiations in Oman. And this is all happening while European governments are already stretched thin, simultaneously trying to balance their own domestic air defense inventories with the ongoing long-range attacks between Ukraine and Russia.
Right, so it leaves global trade routes highly vulnerable everywhere.
Highly vulnerable.
Which actually brings us to a deeply confusing paradox happening right here in the domestic U.S. economy.
Yeah.
So the July jobs report came out, and it was unexpectedly weak. The U.S. economy outright lost 23,000 jobs in July.
Yeah, that was a shock to a lot of people.
And to make the picture even starker, the numbers for May and June were revised downward by a massive 103,000 jobs.
Yet, and this is the crazy part, the unemployment rate stayed completely flat at 4.1%.
Right, because fewer people actively participated in the labor market. The denominator literally changed. So the labor picture is undeniably softening. But, and this is the paradox the briefing really highlights, the S&P 500 reached another record. Wall Street just seemed to look right past a net loss of jobs and these massive downward revisions.
What's fascinating here is the underlying math that Wall Street traders are relying on. Because for a well-informed investor, bad news on Main Street is sometimes actually treated as good news on Wall Street.
Which sounds completely backward.
It does. But the Federal Reserve has a dual mandate, right? Control inflation and maximize employment. Traders are trying to solve this massive equation, basically calculating whether this specific weakness in hiring will force the Federal Reserve to aggressively cut interest rates.
And cheaper borrowing makes corporate expansion easier, which props up stock prices.
Exactly. Wall Street is betting that the labor softness will outweigh the immense inflation pressures coming from those energy bottlenecks we just discussed in the Strait of Hormuz, along with ongoing tariffs.
It is a massive high-wire act.
Oh, total high-wire act. And while this tug-of-war is happening, institutional money is moving very strategically. The sources note that healthcare funds attracted about $2.44 billion just in July.
Wow. So investors are trying to diversify away from these crowded, maybe overvalued technology positions. They're anticipating better, more stable healthcare earnings through 2026 and 2027.
Right. It's a defensive play.
Yeah, a defensive play. So the takeaway for you listening to this isn't about panicking over one single month of lost jobs. It's about recognizing that long-term inflation is driven by physical, geopolitical choke points halfway around the world. And market records are often just, bets on how central banks will react to that stress.
Completely. And that exact vulnerability relying on fragile physical systems and massive capital investments is precisely what the tech industry is suddenly grappling with in the realm of artificial intelligence.
Yes. This is such a huge shift. The Sunday Tech theme in the briefing is vertical integration. For the last few years, we've all thought of AI as basically just software.
Right, it's a chatbot in the cloud.
Exactly. But the industry is hitting a wall. AI requires an astounding amount of physical infrastructure.
And here is the scope of that shift. NVIDIA, which is the absolute titan of designing AI chips, is reportedly planning to invest as much as $3 billion in a company called Lancium.
$3 billion.
Yeah. Lancium is a developer of what they call Stargate data centers. These aren't your typical server farms, right? These are gigawatt-scale facilities engineered from the ground up to handle the unprecedented power and cooling loads required by the next generation of AI.
Wow.
And at the same time, Meta is launching a custom AI chip this September to basically double its own computing capacity.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting, and I have to push back on the strategies a little bit.
Yeah.
NVIDIA is a $3 trillion company because they design chips.
Yeah.
That is high-margin intellectual property.
Sure.
Building concrete data centers, securing land permits, stringing high-voltage power lines. That is a brutally low-margin, slow physical business. Why would a chip designer dilute their incredible business model to pour concrete? Isn't that kind of like a car manufacturer buying up oil refineries and paving their own highways?
It is entirely like that, actually, and they are doing it out of sheer existential necessity.
Really?
Yeah, because you can design the most advanced AI accelerator in the world, capable of 1 trillion calculations a second, but if there's nowhere on the power grid to plug it in...
Your product is useless.
Exactly. Your product is utterly useless. We are facing a severe deficit in physical infrastructure right now.
Yeah.
Data centers today demand immense tracts of land, dedicated power substations, massive networking equipment, and incredibly advanced liquid cooling system.
Liquid cooling, yeah.
So hardware suppliers like NVIDIA are financing the infrastructure themselves because, frankly, if they don't build the plug, they can't sell the chip.
Right. They are horizontally securing their own future revenue. And, this massive physical expansion brings us to the regulatory layer. Because when you start consuming gigawatts of national power, governments get involved.
Oh, always.
As we noted in our disclaimer earlier, President Trump has actively criticized current congressional proposals, stating they risk regulating the American AI industry right out of business.
Right.
Concurrently, lawmakers are pushing for guardrails because they're extremely worried about cybersecurity vulnerabilities, massive employment disruption, and just the sheer monopolistic power of tech giants owning both the hardware and the infrastructure.
And we are seeing parallel regulatory battles in cryptocurrency, too. I mean,
Yeah.
the Senate just advanced a landmark bill to establish a federal regulatory framework for crypto.
Finally.
Right, but they are totally deadlocked over consumer protection and jurisdictional oversight. Consumer advocates are demanding stringent disclosures and heavy reserve requirements, while the tech and financial sectors are pushing for clear, simple rules regarding exchanges and digital custody.
And while Congress debates all of this, the AI industry is being forced to adapt to different global realities right now, in real time.
Yeah, they can't wait around.
No.
Yeah.
The briefing highlights two stark examples of this. First, Apple. They just published instructions allowing eligible Mac users in mainland China to connect Alibaba's Qwen service to Siri.
Right, and Qwen is Alibaba's regional large language model. This really shows that the seamless AI assistants on your devices are going to use entirely different underlying cognitive engines depending on where you physically stand on the globe.
Wow.
And it's entirely to comply with local geopolitical regulations. The technology is actively being geofenced.
That's wild. And the second example is a major shift in how AI actually operates. OpenAI has apparently paused portions of the development for Project Astra. They paused it specifically to test for practical, critical cybersecurity capabilities. And the distinction the sources make here is vital.
It is. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is the exact moment AI is transitioning from being a librarian to being an agent.
A librarian to an agent.
Yeah, because previously, AI was tested on whether it could explain a known cyber attack, like a librarian handing you a book on the subject.
Okay, sure.
But now they are testing whether the system can autonomously navigate a network, discover a zero-day vulnerability, and execute an offensive cyber operation without any human intervention.
Wait, so they are testing if it can actually pull the trigger?
Yes, exactly. The industry's central challenge is no longer just producing smarter, faster models. It is proving that these autonomous models can be contained, observed, and controlled. Because if you deploy an agent that can act on your behalf, you need restricted permissions, continuous architectural logging, and a verifiable human in the loop to approve any irreversible action.
That is heavy. So, tying this back to the labor market we discussed earlier, what does this mean for the workforce? If AI is no longer just a fun app on your phone, but this massive, physically demanding, regulated infrastructure, where is the career leverage for people?
Well, the briefing provides a very clear answer for that. The most durable career advantage right now isn't necessarily knowing how to write Python code.
Really?
Yeah, it is the ability to translate fast-moving technology into dependable physical operations. Because of this multi-billion-dollar data center boom, demand is absolutely skyrocketing for high-voltage electricians, network infrastructure engineers, industrial cooling specialists, and regulatory compliance officers.
That makes total sense. You need someone who actually understands the physics of thermodynamics when a cluster of 10,000 AI chips starts overheating the server racks.
Exactly. The physical world always bats last.
Always bats last. I love that. Which is actually the perfect pivot because all of this infrastructure, the Lancium Stargate data centers, the advanced liquid cooling, the immense electricity draws, it all relies entirely on a physical environment that is currently redlining.
Yeah, the system is under massive, unprecedented stress. The meteorological data in this briefing paints a picture of a really dangerous compounding loop.
The details are intense. Just in the past week, the Phoenix area was hit by two massive haboobs. And for those unfamiliar, a haboob is a gigantic wall of dust, sometimes literally miles high, formed by the intense downdrafts of thunderstorms.
It's terrifying.
It is.
Yeah.
And researchers just classified these specific dust storms at the absolute highest level of a newly developed severity scale.
Right, and at the same time, climate scientists are closely monitoring an unusually strong El Niño developing in the Pacific Ocean. Because of the sheer thermal mass of the oceans, they're projecting temperatures could rise more than 2 degrees Celsius above historical averages.
Which is huge.
It's massive. That specific anomaly brings major sustained flood risks to California and the American Southeast.
We also have Typhoon Dolphin currently disrupting power grids and transportation networks around Okinawa, Japan. And simultaneously, satellites are tracking massive, highly active wildfires across the American West, throughout Canada, and down into southern Europe.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
So here's the fundamental question for the tech industry, right? with massive haboobs burying cities in abrasive dust, typhoons knocking out coastal power, and wildfires burning across continents, how are these multi-billion-dollar tech companies and global supply chains supposed to function? I mean, the very ground they're building these Stargate data centers on is either on fire, flooding, or buried in dust.
This raises an important question, and it's where the scientific outlook in the briefing really connects all the dots for us. Because these extreme events are not just isolated bad weather days, they are a deeply interconnected feedback loop.
How so?
Well, ocean temperature anomalies alter the jet stream, which then drives prolonged droughts. A drought depletes soil moisture, making a haboob vastly more severe, which degrades regional air quality. Hot, dry weather creates a heat dome, increasing the risk that physical power equipment, which, by the way, is already running at maximum capacity to cool these massive new AI data centers, will spark a wildfire.
It's a total domino effect.
Yeah.
The soil moisture drops, the dust rises, the heat spikes, the grid strains, and the whole system breaks. The briefing notes, this is forcing a massive operational rethink across industries. Extreme weather is now forcing summer festivals, outdoor concerts, sports leagues, and global tourism to entirely revamp their operations, focusing heavily on heat mitigation and rapid evacuation logistics.
And we also have to look at the direct physiological toll this takes on the human body, too. Wildfire smoke is drastically increasing the statistical risks for people with asthma and underlying cardiovascular disease.
Definitely.
But the detail the briefing highlights regarding heat is really crucial. It's about overnight temperatures.
Right. It's not just the 110-degree daytime highs that get you.
Yeah.
It's the fact the human body physiologically requires cooler ambient conditions at night to drop its core temperature and recover from daytime exposure.
Exactly.
If the temperature doesn't drop at night, your cardiovascular system just can't reset. The strain is immense, especially for outdoor workers and older adults.
The health repercussions of these shifting systems are very, very tangible. And on the topic of public health infrastructure, the briefing actually provides two significant tracking updates that we should mention. First, the United States is currently recording its highest annual measles total in decades.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the data shows that the vast majority of these infections involve individuals who are unvaccinated. Public health agencies are urgently requesting that families confirm their MMR vaccination status, particularly before children return to school environments or, before embarking on any international travel.
And the second major update is an expanding multi-state outbreak of cyclospora.
Right.
Now, this is a parasitic infection that causes prolonged severe fatigue, cramping, and dehydration. It's been epidemiologically linked to contaminated lettuce, hitting at least 15 states and resulting in 2 deaths.
That's awful. But the crucial distinction here is the transmission vector. Cyclospora spreads exclusively through contaminated food or water, right? Not person-to-person contact.
Right, exactly.
So public health investigators are basically operating much like the supply chain analysts we discussed earlier. They are frantically tracing purchasing records backwards through the system to find the common grower or agricultural supplier.
And that is the key strategic takeaway here. This is a supply chain tracking issue. Just as analysts trace a semiconductor's journey from Taiwan to California, epidemiology is essentially just data science applied to the food supply.
Huh. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, they're looking for the single point of failure in our agricultural infrastructure. So the response for you at home isn't to permanently ban all salads from your fridge in a panic. It's to look for the specific FDA recall notices, rely on the tracing data, and just make informed decisions about your consumption.
Okay, we have covered a massive amount of ground today. I mean, from the Persian Gulf to Silicon Valley data centers, all the way to the stratosphere over Phoenix.
It is a dense web of information for sure, but the patterns are incredibly clear once you lay them all out.
So what does this all mean? Let's zoom out and look at the whole board here. We are living in a moment of massive, physically interconnected shifts. A diplomatic standoff in Oman over vessel inspections artificially shrinks the global shipping fleet, which keeps inflation high.
Yep.
To fight that inflation, the Fed manipulates rates, which moves the stock market despite a net loss of jobs. Meanwhile, AI companies are realizing they can't just write software anymore. They are spending billions buying up land and power grids to run their new models, right at the exact moment that an environmental feedback loop of extreme heat and El Niño floods threatens the stability of those very same power grids.
It's all tied together. And if there's one structural insight you take away from this deep dive, it's that critical thinking and seeing the big picture is basically the only viable way to navigate this landscape. You cannot isolate the July jobs report from the maritime insurance cost of energy.
No.
You cannot isolate a breakthrough in an autonomous AI language model from the gigawatts of physical power required to cool the servers running it. Every single digital ambition we have is inextricably linked to the physical realities of a planet that is currently under immense stress.
It is all profoundly connected. Which leaves me with a final thought I want you to mull over as you go about your day. We are watching the tech industry race to build this massive, absolutely unprecedented physical infrastructure for AI. These Stargate data centers will demand historic amounts of electricity and water.
Unimaginable amounts, yeah.
And at the exact same time, the climate is generating unprecedented extreme weather events that strain our existing power grids to the breaking point. So what happens when the unstoppable force of AI power demand collides with an increasingly fragile, climate-stressed global power grid?
That is the million-dollar question.
Will AI's massive physical footprint make it the ultimate victim of climate change because its data centers simply can't secure the reliable power they need to function? Or will those very same AI models become the analytical tools we finally use to optimize the smart grid, engineer new materials, and actually solve the climate crisis?
It is the defining technological paradox of our time.
Yeah.
I mean, the tool we need to fix the system might be the very thing that overloads it.
It really is. You pull one geopolitical thread and the entire global supply chain moves. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We always love exploring these massive, interconnected topics with you, and we warmly invite you to return next time as we unpack whatever the world throws at us next.